Tessa, it's so good to meet you. You also have just like a way cooler chair than I do. Like I really wish I had a chair on that level. So just amazing. Um,
Yeah,
but
but
I'm excited.
your chair moves around, right?
Yeah, but it's just I mean, it's like in the way that all chairs can. But I mean, I think you gave away the moving ability for, I think, clear power, and I think it's a good. No, it's perfect. Um, I'm so excited to talk to you because I'm curious for you, um, getting to play this role and getting to join Westworld when you did. You joined after the first season, and I remember watching the first season, and I feel like if I watched it, I would just be like, "Oh my God, it would be so cool." And I'm curious what that was like for you to jump into a thing and kind of take this character that has a really cool arc.
So I joined Westworld actually I think at the end of season one. I feel like maybe it was around episode 7 or 8 or
Oh, okay.
something. So I hadn't seen the show, but I had seen the pilot, and I had seen the film, the Michael Crichton film, the 1973 film. So I was familiar with the world. Um, and actually, funnily, I just remembered I got the script for the pilot and sent in an audition tape for the pilot. And I remember it was so weird because I was trying to figure out how to play a robot, and then I didn't get a call back. I never heard anything about it. And then much later, there was this chance to play a human on the show. So I was kind of relieved that I didn't have to figure out sort of the thing of playing a robot. But it was interesting because Lisa Joy, of course, the co-creator of the show, really wanted my character to come in and sort of shake up the kind of the tone. So that was kind of, I don't know, challenging and interesting. And my first scenes were with Jeffrey Wright, and um, that was incredible. And with Anthony Hopkins, so it sort of felt surreal to work with people that I really admire, and also have to occupy this space, at least in our scenes where I had power over them. That was sort of bizarre.
Yeah, I'm curious like what it's like when I'm assuming you don't exactly know where it's going, but as an actor too, sometimes you just pick up on things that are in the script that sometimes even the writers don't know. And I'm curious if you've had any of those experiences because I will write stuff for people on my show and then they'll tell me stuff and I'm like, oh man, that I didn't even see it that way. And I'm curious like if that's been your experience in a world that has such a different tone too.
Yeah, I had that so much because I didn't know anything about where my character would go. I had broad ideas, which was like, what does power look like in the future? Could power look like a young woman? Could power look like a young woman of color? So I loved those ideas. But the only thing I knew is that I would potentially have sex with a robot, and I knew I was human. And the only way I knew that is because at the time, I don't know if this has changed, but at the time on HBO, you had to sign like a nudity waiver if you were going to be on certain shows because the chances are that you could get naked. And typically, I know when I'm going to get naked, who with. So I kind of like I sort of like picked their brain. I was like I'm fine to explore nudity, but I'd love to know in what context. And so we talked about this potential that you could see this woman sort of sampling the merchandise in the park, and that would be her expression of power, is that she sort of does what she wants. And I love that. But I continue not to know where the show's going to take me. I'm curious for you because obviously, the show is semi autobiographical, right? You're pulling from your life. Um, did you always know what parts you wanted or were going to explore? Were there areas, were there pockets of your life that you are surprised that you actually
Yeah.
excavated, for people to see?
Yeah, it's funny because like I I had such a different entry point into being really comfortable on camera. I was working as an actor and I was doing a bunch of stuff, but I didn't really feel like I found my range until to write for myself. I felt like I would look at a script and actually really respect writing, so I'd almost be so into the writing that someone gave me that I would have a hard time messing with it too much. Like sometimes I'd improvise a line here or there, and then I'd feel guilty, and I'd be like, "Oh man, you can't do that to the person who wrote it." But coming from stand up, I really like the ability to just switch stuff around based on how it feels, and being, in this show and kind of realizing the feeling that I really was chasing was just wanting to be as nervous as I could and kind of reveal certain things or certain emotions or go into certain places that I didn't really have the freedom to do anywhere else. So I kind of went in with this idea of what I might do, and then what I actually ended up doing with the show and with the other characters. Yeah, you can't know until you really get in there and like meet the people, and that's why I like love really good actors because I think they tell good writers also what's going on. Like I don't think
Yeah.
it's always like a master plan. I think it really is, oh, now that I've met the person who I've been imagining playing my dad, this has to change, for the better, right? To like to fit into what they're bringing.
I noticed that his hair changed between season one and season two. Was it the actor that plays your father? Um, he, I love your family dynamics and the way that they're explored on the show. Is there a pressure in a way in terms of those portrayals for you that they feel accurate? Is it hard to sort of I don't know. Is it hard to see other people play people that you're really close to, and do you have to like? I would imagine for myself, I might have to stop myself from wanting to come in and give more ideas about intonation or about point of view. Is that tricky for you?
That's really funny that you noticed the hair thing. Yeah, it was we played with his shaved because he's got a good head of hair and but I was like,
He has a
the
great head
dad.
of hair.
He really does. I mean, and we were just like, but the Egyptian dad's got to be bald. Like I personally think all good dads are bald. Just like a real dad. I'm like dads with like a really strong hairline. I'm like, I don't know, you're not stressed enough about your
It's
kid.
true. It's
And
true. My
did you have
dad,
a
my
bald
dad always
dad?
growing up. Yeah, my dad always growing up had like these incredible. He had like dreadlocks. He had incredible huge fro. But as he's like eased into real dadhood, it's been bald. And that
It's
you're
got to
right.
be.
You trust a dad more when he's bald.
You really do, because I would have friends who have dads with like full heads of hair, and I'm like, he doesn't care about you. Like, there's no way this dude is like, he's not up worrying. It's just not, something's off. And you kind of look at them and you're like, I don't even trust you because you're not afraid of losing yours. Because there's always got to be the fear
Yeah.
that you could be like your dad. And then I'm like, oh, so you're just cocky because you just think you're gonna walk around with hair your whole life. Just scary stuff. But we played with it a little bit on him, and for me, these aren't exactly my parents. It's more like a lot of the process too was kind of separating. Okay, I actually don't want this to be too biographical, especially when we got into the second season. It was almost more, so much of it was like life is kind of this fork, and I really wanted to feel like, well, what if I went left instead of going right? What would my life look like? And so much of the show is kind of a projection of that. It's a projection of what if I let my ego run wild? What if I let my insecurities run wild? And how would that play out? And it's kind of the same with a lot of these characters where I kind of have seeds from people in my family or my community, but then, how do we kind of like take them to different places that people usually hide? But then also really like it gets a little tricky because I this my show is not only the only show that's attempting to show Muslims or that is speaking Arabic or any of these things in the English language. It's like the only show that's doing that. And you kind of get into this place where you're like, man, if this is the only thing people are seeing, um, y- there's an instinct to not want to take risks, but then you realize you have to. And I think part of why I was interested in talking to you too is because even as you're talking about playing this character and you mentioned playing a woman of color in this world that you do, but just what level of responsibility do you feel playing your roles when people are looking at you representing black women and representing you know people who haven't really had a diversified view on screen in the way that at least we're starting to be able to.
Yeah, well, I think something that you said just hit it on the nail is that like there is a real sort of expectation and feeling of responsibility when you are the only one. And the truth is, there's like this burden of being exceptional. And while I think like you're exceptional, and I feel like I hope I'm exceptional too, I don't think we should be the only ones. You know, I think that the work that we do should just be inside of a diversity of ideas and thoughts around our identity because like Muslims are not a monolith and neither are black people. um, I I guess I try to encourage myself not to feel um, a real responsibility to be an ambassador because the truth is like I can only speak to my own experience, which is not the experience of all black women, you know? Like I as a light skinned black woman have a different experience than say some of my counterparts. One moment. Alexa's talking to me. Um, it's terrifying when they answer you. You're just like, I wasn't even.
Alexa was like, hold on, hold on.
She's like, one moment, just you're.
This hole inside me that I keep trying to fill, but I can't. And I've tried to fill it with sex and porn, but it only makes things worse. It's like the more people I'm with, the lonelier I feel.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny. I think about that a lot. Like in watching your show, I thought about that a lot because there were so many things that I feel like I wasn't seeing ever. I wasn't seeing a Muslim family presented that way. I wasn't seeing. I had never seen in this way someone with muscular dystrophy, a person who used a wheelchair, and in a way that was like humanizing, in a way that you could also laugh at it, that you could, you know, that it occupied spaces that made me feel uncomfortable, and made me sort of question my relationship to you know folks like Steve Way, and what that means and how challenging that is. And I feel like that is what we need to do is to be able to inside of you know this skin that feels rarefied and feels like goodness, like this is my own experience that I don't see projected a lot, and so I feel this responsibility in how I project it. But the truth is, when we're able to take risks and really go there and speak from a place of honesty and also a place that's imaginative, I feel like you sort of set people free, you know, because there's bound to be somebody that in your portrayal feels seen, and understood in a way that they hadn't before. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but I wrestle with this. I wrestle with this a lot because also when we talk about representation, I feel heartened that inside of Hollywood there's this idea around diversity, but I get really annoyed with the way that the term sometimes is thrown around because for me the thing that's really exciting is diversity of ideas, you know?
Yeah.
And you still look at the way that black and brown people are portrayed in the media, and there's still a sort of sameness. There's things that, like culturally, it feels like we're really obsessed with watching, like black pain, you know,
Mm.
and black and brown criminality, and so for me, I'm like, I just want to see things that are fresh and new, and for us to be able to exist in ways that we have never existed before. Um,
Mm.
I'm not
How
sure
much
that
does
I've
that
seen.
factor into like? But how you're not sure that you've seen what?
Well, like on your show, like this, it seems silly, and I forgive me for being sort of crass, but I'm not sure I've seen like a man of color masturbate. I
I
mean, you
mean,
know,
look, this is the
on a
type of
television show.
representation that I think is, it's just very important representation. We got to make sure that people, that people know it's super, super humanizing or something. I don't know. My dad calls me and he's just like, "What are you doing? What are you doing to the family? Why are you doing this?" You know?
You're doing important work. It's what you can tell.
My dad just calls me. He's like, "Well, why are you? Why? We how bad were we raising you?" And I'm like, "No, this is you don't deserve this." Um, I wonder, like. just like a lot of the stuff you're hitting on, um, it's I wonder like how much it factors into the roles that you're choosing, you know, like because I think there's this thing of like I find when I'm going out to audition for stuff, there's I guess there's this balance, right? Because when you're trying to like get to where you're at now on the way, you're kind of like, well, I got to do whatever I can do. But then
Yeah.
now you're in this place where you have the nuance of choice, and I guess even additionally to that, you have this because I see like how active you are on social media talking about things in a really thoughtful way, and I guess I wonder like how does that influence your decision of what to play, right? Like and how have you been able to kind of step into that? I mean, I think times are changing, but then also you're at a different stage of your career. I feel like that's a really exciting place to be in because I think you really get to manifest so much of what you want.
Yeah, I'm curious for you too, because I definitely experienced that early on. You know, you're just auditioning and seeing what sticks, you know? But there would be some auditions where like you were playing, you know, this sassy friend or something, um, and they were so one dimensional and in some cases kind of offensive, you know. And so I feel like it. And the truth is, I just wanted to work, but I could never really do those parts very well, you know, in the same way that like as a woman, for example, I feel like I had such genderized experiences when I first started because you would get breakdowns and it would say like 25 sexy, you know, like I had to ask my agent after a while
Well,
just to black out all of the descriptions because I would feel so intimidated when I knew that a character was supposed to be perceived as sexy. And of course,
mm,
like sexiness is it's totally I mean, there's nothing, you know, objective about it, right? It's sort of like how you feel. But something about reading those words made me feel actually so small and made me feel like I had to fit into some box of what sexiness looks like. So I was like, I can't ever look at anything like that. And in the same way around race, around this idea, this performative idea around race, I guess I'm lucky in the sense that I was never particularly good at any of that. And so I
mm,
just kind of didn't work as much in the beginning, or I worked on things that I felt like just had a bit more nuance inside of
mm,
it. And then I feel like around the time um, of Dear White People, right before that, in this film that I made, I was really tired of the kind of opportunities that I was presented, and I told myself like I'll move from Los Angeles, I'll move to New York, and maybe I'll do a play, or maybe I'll just like hang out on a park bench. Like I'll just take a break from working for a while and see what
mm,
you know what could be really interesting. And then I found this script, Dear White People, and the film was talking about that. It was an interrogation of Hollywood. It really, the film sort of, you know, told us in a way that, you know, culture isn't just represented in media, culture is created in media. And so you create
mm,
a culture where you
mm,
expect Black people to look and act and think and behave a certain way, and you perpetuate ideas around them that are harmful, actually.
mm,
Um,
mm.
and that's obviously something that we're really talking about in a really robust way now. And so that film for me sort of changed my trajectory. It made it okay in a way for me to no longer stomach some of those portrayals, to figure out that I wanted to like pave a new course.
Mm.
Um, and it's something that obviously so many people before me have been trying to do, and I stand directly on their shoulders. But it really helped me decide just to say no more, frankly, and that I just even if
I
it
mean,
meant I didn't. Yeah,
I remember I remember seeing that, and I remember seeing the trailer for that movie, and immediately just being like, "Whoa!" Like right away, there was just even the color palette, like everything,
yeah,
and then it was just something about seeing that point of view in the way it was presented. You were so good in it, and I just remember just thinking, "Oh, whoa, this is." It just felt like a thing, you know? It just felt like, "Oh, we needed this shift." And it's something that I, like, think about a lot because that obviously is, like, an interrogation of the way representation has been, right? And
yeah,
it addresses it in this way that's doesn't dance around it, which is what's so cool about it. And I think even stuff sometimes that I feel like I'm doing with my show, and sometimes stuff that I see, that are things that are starting to happen with, like you're even talking about the way women have been written, right? And I feel this thing where like we're we kind of all grew up with, anyone who's basically in any sort of different group watching TV. We grew up watching ourselves either not in it or in super marginalized roles. And then we kind of get to a place where we get to be acting and writing, and we almost kind of address those things head on, like a lot of stuff is happening. But it's weird because like we grew up watching things in a certain way, so we have to do all this like unwiring, right? So it's even like to get like a true female centric point of view, there are a lot of women in writers rooms who I still grew up watching male centric TV, and like, conversations with women who are writers who are like, it's weird because I'm writing my experience but I'm still kind of writing it from a male point of view somehow. Like it's this thing because
Wow.
of like so much of what we've watched, right?
Yeah.
We have to like undo our own, frames of reference that we have about ourselves because of kind of how, powerful these portrayals can be. And so I'm curious, like what, there's this level of addressing it, but I'm curious like what you think is next, right? Because sometimes I'll watch like Tim and Eric and I'm like, why can't there be like why do I have to talk about being Muslim? Why can't I just like do weird stuff with like bunnies and like hang at a hot dog stand or whatever? Like it's so
But
much of what
I was
it's
just, that's what I just wanted to ask you because I think like there's something so vital about centering ourselves inside of the narrative about what you do on your show, which by the way is not just, you know, these portrayals of Muslim identity that are so nuanced and complicated, but also of women, of what a person with disabilities, what their life looks like. I mean, I think there's so much that you're doing on your show that's so vital, and hopefully makes way for so many other stories, you know, that want to hang out in the same space. But I'm really curious, what do you want to do that's totally outside of yourself? You know, because I think about that a lot. You know, I think about that a lot, and sometimes it's hard not to think about it in terms of race or gender identity, which is annoying. But I look at like all the films and all the television shows growing up that I love so much that we, in some cases, were pretty invisible inside of those narratives. And so I kind of like just want to go back and rewrite those things, you know, because
mm,
there's so many spaces that I'd love to occupy. But I feel like that still is a conversation that makes it so gender or about race. And I'm curious in getting past that because I feel like, particularly since it's you and I talking, we're always asked that by
yeah,
everybody, you know?
I
And so
know.
I'm curious, like, between us, if we don't have to think about that, what do we want to think about? Like, what do we want to
It's
do?
like a it's like an exciting thing because it's almost like we have to do a lot of the things we're doing, and I don't begrudge it in any way. I love doing it because in my sense, I'm like, well, I want ownership over these narratives because they will be told, and I don't want them to be told by somebody who doesn't have the values that are being portrayed, right? Because the idea of writing a story about a Muslim family or a black woman who is coming into her own, right? That's like a good business idea at this point. Like that's something that like, any writer in Sherman
We're
Oaks is like, oh
trending.
yeah, like I gotta, oh man, yeah, yeah. It's like you meet like you meet some dude who, knows three black people, but his script is about a young black woman because he's like, come on, man, this is gonna sell. And you're like, well, I don't want that guy to write it, and it's funny too, because that's like a lot of the times a barometer for me when I'm writing, where I'm like, could that dude in Studio City think of this storyline? Like I got to make sure that like he wouldn't think of this. Like that's how specific it's got to be. Like I want this to be something that like only I could know. Like it's got to pass that authenticity test. But so much of that again is like,
You don't want some guy named Dan to have written it outside of Chipotle on like on
I mean,
Ventura.
100. Oh my God, if Dan could have written this over a burrito bowl, it's got to go. Like that's the barometer for almost any line of dialogue. It's like could Dan have written this? And it's no offense to Dan's, like I don't
No,
this is not an indictment of any Dan's. It's more just
yeah,
us being able to again like we have like it's kind of this thing, but I almost feel like we're doing a lot of work, like people before us did work for us, and then sometimes I'm like, okay, we're doing work, and I'm almost like, man, almost just because growing up I had the news, a couple terrorist shows, and like Aladdin. You know, like Aladdin had a carpet, and you're like, we don't even know if he's Muslim. Like, does he pray on it? I don't know, but he can fly on it. Like, that's how much guesswork you had to do. And now it's like, okay, cool, I get to put out this thing, but I'm almost feeling, I feel like we have to do all this again. Don't have to, but it is, I'm glad to do all this work to kind of show people where we're at and take ownership over our stories. But I feel like so much of the groundwork we're putting in too is so that the next generation of filmmakers can just be weird. They can watch that and be like, oh cool, like the Muslim thing was covered. You know, I've seen some really dope nuanced things between black men and black women and white men and black men, like, you know, and now what does that next frontier of storytelling look like? That I don't even think I want it to ever like transcend race or anything like that, but it's almost like just the ability to really not have to explain ourselves. Like this idea that like we could make stuff that just sits in whatever emotional thing we want to without it having to be like a flag, you know? And it's something that I don't think we're really quite there.
And if we were there, what kind of weird stuff would you want to do? What does the new frontier look like for you?
No, but I asked you that because I don't know, so I wanted you to tell me because I'm not sure. I put that on you. It I don't know.
I have
It's
to say though,
exciting.
to your credit, I feel like something that I really enjoy about your show is that there are moments of magical realism, that it doesn't exist just um, in this space that feels um, totally contained in like everyday life. I think your show, inside of all of the things that you're talking about, is so wildly imaginative. And that's something that I feel really excited actually about our generation, because I feel like we're still wanting to talk about ideas of race and gender, but I think we're wanting to present those ideas in new and exciting ways and to defy genre, and to really talk about these things in a cinematic and visually interesting way that really makes use of the medium. And
Yeah,
also to present some of these ideas and none of it like medicine. It's not prescriptive. It's like what
yeah,
I love about your show is that it feels like it asks more questions than it answers. And meanwhile, it's doing this really important thing of providing representation for a whole group of marginalized people. When I watch your stand-up special, my favorite part actually is watching some of the Muslim women in the audience and their responses to you and some of the jokes. Like, I'm happy and I'm laughing because the jokes are well presented, but I feel like this extra layer of joy at this community that I experience that I'm outside of. Like, I don't
yeah,
entirely get the breadth of it, but I can tell in the way that they're looking at you and laughing at you that you're speaking to something that's at their core. And I think that's the beauty. For some people, it feels like they think if we get to tell our stories too specifically, this is what I feel like happens on the studio level a lot, is there's this idea that our stories are too small, they're too narrow in scope, so only people that understand them are going to want to watch them. And the truth
mm,
is, like Lorraine Hansberry spoke to this, when you write something with such specificity, no generalization, that's how it becomes universal. Everyone can understand it. Um, but I'm still not answering the question about the new frontier.
well, no. The
Um,
interesting thing is actually even I'm almost kind of thinking about it because it's like even what you're doing on Westworld doesn't really hinge on your identity, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
you're
no,
totally entering this philosophical presentation about the human race. It's so amazing. And I mean, not even like, not to give away, I guess, I don't know, spoiler or whatever for this season, of just kind of realizing the link you have to another character, right? Or like playing,
yeah.
those emotional things and doing that simultaneously. That that maybe actually even fits into some of the box of what I'm talking about, right? Because that's just truly like your actor muscles.
Yeah, I think that's what I've really been enjoying about science fiction in general. I never thought that I would like make superhero movies. So much of the work that I've done in the last 5 years is not spaces that I ever thought that I would occupy, not necessarily because of race, although that's a part of it, but mostly just because, I don't know, I always thought I would just make kind of small, very human indies, you know? Like I never thought that I would like be in outer space or have a sword or be in the future. I just never imagined it for myself. So I think that feels like, yeah, it feels like in the last little bit in my career has been a new frontier in terms of really talking about human ideas, you know, because every good story has, the seed has to be something that we understand. But talking about it in really far out ways, you know, and in ways that are not entirely based in reality or humanity as we know it. And I think something that's so cool about things that exist in the future is you also have the potential to talk about the world not just as it might be, but as it could be or should be.
Mm.
And I really love the idea of getting to do that inside of work, you know, to rewrite ideas, to reframe them. So I've had a lot of fun, and then there's also just weird challenges. So this season on Westworld, I don't want to spoil, but I guess if people haven't seen it, then I mean
I mean, come on, what are they
it's been
doing?
a while, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm officially not a human anymore. I'm a host, and so there was
And did
there
you
was
know
a
that from the
lot.
beginning or no? You didn't know
Yeah,
that up top, or you did?
I knew it from the beginning because it sort of happened last season. But I what I didn't know when we ended last season was who I would necessarily be inhabited by. Like, you know, so on Westworld there's this idea, if people haven't seen it, that we have a pearl inside of our husk, which is our like robot body, and a pearl is our consciousness, but essentially our data. Um, so I didn't know whose consciousness was inside my skin when we began, and then I knew shortly thereafter. So there's so much fun to play with that, and then also this idea that, like, for example, when I'm playing Charlotte, my old character, there's this idea that the host, this robot, wants to, you know, appear as human as possible, and they can do that flawlessly because they're these extraordinary machines. But when humans aren't looking, there's this whole action sequence. Suddenly, when I don't have the responsibility of appearing human, I can do things like shoot a person without looking at them. You
Hmm.
know, I have this superhuman ability, and that is so fun to do. Like I never thought it was like full Terminator, you know? And I know, you know, that's the kind of stuff that I feel like is pure imagination. Um,
Yeah.
I love being able to do drama and things that are based in real sincerity. But there's also just, for me, there's been something so liberating about these huge set pieces and having to do action because it feels like it occupies this total childlike space of just pure, like, you know, yeah, I was going to say cops and robbers, but I don't even want to talk about cops or robbers anymore.
Yeah, probably not,
um,
is it? Well, it does this thing too that is, my show very much obviously is about faith. But what's interesting to me is like I think what Westworld does in such a cool way is it questions something that I think like we really worship as a society right now. I think it kind of like cracks open the question around what is autonomy, because I think we really worship our sense of independence to the point where
yeah,
independence has just kind of become this thing that we kind of are breaking out of our tribes in all these ways. Like I remember I started watching Westworld and I think part of this link too is I started watching it. I was reading I don't know if you've read Tribe by Sebastian Younger, but
no,
he it's so amazing because it's like he really talks about the way we even just this idea that like we would all live in our own apartments, like one person per apartment, and it kind of does this really weird thing to like how our society could look. And then you jump all this way into Westworld and there's hosts and there's like all these concepts where it's almost like it is this really cool look at our tribe system and kind of could happen to it, or what it even means, right? And I guess my question to you as an actor is I feel like I would just be so in the philosophy of that. Like, I don't know that I like I would like I've never been in anything like that, and it's just part of me that I feel like I would just be like over analyzing everything that's happening. Um, at what points are you zooming into just the fun emotion, and then at what points are you really looking at the bigger picture of what the show is talking about? Like, what is the biggest takeaway
Yeah.
for you that how does the big picture affect the emotions?
Yeah, it's tricky. I feel like it's a balance this season because it was so sort of emotional in terms of what the character is experiencing. It felt like the most real personal experience that I had with the show because typically the show just makes me spiral, you know? And I think about so much that is true now in terms of the autonomy that we give away with these devices that we are constantly in communication with. You know, I think of things like predictive policing and the way that
Mhm.
algorithms control our life and how dangerous they are. And so the show makes me contend with that. And still, I'm like on my phone all the time giving away privacy because the truth is, it's like almost in our DNA now. We move through life if you're someone that deals with a smartphone and with Alexa who's listening to us. Like, you know, to become untethered from those things becomes really challenging. And that's something that I think a lot about on the show. And obviously, ideas around free will. And I feel like they become even more pressing when we live in a space where we deal with algorithms so much and they control sort of what we see and how we think and how we live. Um, and also, added to the layer of that is that on Westworld, as an actor, you don't always know what you're doing. So the truth is, you're sort of operating from this space of you don't have control over your destiny. You're sort of at the will of your creator. In this case, it's Lisa Joy and Jonah Nolan, and I love them and I trust them, so it's okay. But there is a sort of um, relationship with your maker in a way that is interesting on that show. I'm curious for you though, because on your show, at least from the outside perspective, to me, it seems like you have so much autonomy. Is that daunting sometimes because it's so generated by and centered around you? Does that feel just like the most incredible amount of freedom, or does it sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, this is all me?
It's a good question. It almost, in a way, feels necessary because I feel like I've worked out on stage, with stand up, even like in my special, there's a bunch of jokes in that special that when I first talked about them on stage, not only did they get no laughs, but people would say stuff to me like, "How could you? Why would you say it that way?" Just
Oh
because it
wow.
wasn't refined yet. It was just it needed to be worked, and because it's really you. I think you learn in stand up the sensitivity of the difference of three or four words. You just really understand. Oh, okay. If I just said it kind of this way, I removed two words and put this inflection, it works. But if it goes the other way, it's actually like it's gonna really bother some people, and it's kind of this tightrope walk. And for me, I so much of my stand up, when I first got to LA, I had some acting jobs, but I was also just trying to like make money doing stand up, and I would do these Muslim events that were they'd be looking for like halal appropriate comedy. And I came up doing just stand up in comedy clubs and stuff, but then I would go do stand up at these events and I would really have to choose my words because there's just certain subjects that you can't really touch in the same way you can in other places. So if you're in front of this more conservative crowd, they get really touchy when you talk about sex. But then when you're in front of this super liberal crowd, they get really touchy when you talk about religion. And so I kind of was like bouncing back and forth between these two places. And you just start getting really specific as to like, well, not quite like that, not quite like that. And you're just tweaking. And so then I step onto a show like mine, and it just became really clear to me right away. You have a writer's room, you have all this stuff, and you talk about something and then you get something from a writer and then you're like, oh wait, like this is what we talked about, but it's so not calibrated. Like just because of these 10 words, this is really going to piss off a lot of people. And so it became really quickly clear to me that I was going to have to really have my hands in every aspect of it. Just because, again, like we were talking about, there's so little honest portrayals or looks at this kind of stuff. But yeah, just being like mega aware, like I gotta like I gotta really fine tune what word to what word because it'll be the kind of thing that either really makes people laugh or really pisses people off. So
Or
that
offends
balance.
people.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you
yeah.
feel like sometimes you're aiming to offend people?
It's not aiming to offend. It's more like knowing that like there's certain things that only comedy can talk about, and the
Yeah.
reason only comedy can talk about them is because they're touchy. And so I think there's stuff where like sometimes I'll do a joke or put something in an episode and I kind of like put it out there and like turn around a little bit, like this is gonna there's gonna be a little bit of debris. But it's not to be destructive. It's to clear the way for other conversations, but also to clear way for like genuine activism, right? Because I think like something that I have been trying to be super cognizant about is just that our work is really about freeing the mind of people to be able to emotionally connect to the real work that's being done, by people who are out there fighting for it in this really real way. Sometimes we dip into that, but there are people who've dedicated their entire lives to real change, right? And so I think that
Completely.
our work is really a palate cleanser. And so any blowback I get from it, you get from it, it's fine because it's nothing compared to people we both know who are really putting themselves in like legitimately dangerous situations, right? To make
Yeah,
things happen. So I try to not worry about any of that just because I know it's so like not on my plate in the way that it is for other people and like
totally.
respectful of that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a real way, I think like, I'm really of the mind that political change is always preceded by cultural change. And obviously, I think some of what we do are agents of, you know, well, culture in a way. Or we have the ability to contribute to it, which I think can be really powerful, can set the stage. I mean, I've been, so interested in everything that I've learned really recently in understanding, for example, when we talk about systemic racism that has existed in this country for so long,
Mm,
and we talk about the
mm.
problems inside of policing, that one of the impediments has been these long-standing, cop shows that offer a narrative that the police always offer safety and comfort to their communities. So I think changing the narrative inside of the stories that we tell there is value in it. Gosh, I hope. I'm
Well,
curious if
they
you
bounce
feel.
off each other because I remember Biden being like, "Will and Grace helped me understand gay marriage." Like, and so it's like I think there's like these little touch points where you're like, oh wow, that's cool. But I also think that a lot of networks and a lot of places haven't really thought about how systemically unequal it is for people of color in the industry until people started really complaining about that. So
Yeah,
on some it's like media culture can help change policy or can help change what's going on, but I also think it's just like the vocal lack of it and hearing that vocally from people actually pushes art like in this weird way. I feel like Hollywood needs as much protesting as the government does. It's like it's
it,
almost the same
it,
energy of defund the police is like goes into like
it's
make diverse shows. It's like the
No, yeah, I
same
don't know what's it
thing.
called. It's like divest. I also this time of quarantine, like I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm like I don't know if I'll ever work again. It's fine. Like I feel like, and I
I mean,
definitely
you
feel
got
like
that
there's so
chair.
many
I mean,
things.
what you're
I
good.
mean, yeah. What do
I
I
mean,
do? I got this chair.
That's the chair that you have a career for that chair. I need at least a couple more seasons of something so I can upgrade this. But no, you're
No, no, no.
good.
Just so you know, I got this. I begged for this chair. I got this chair. It was a prop. It was a set piece on a film that I did recently. Um, that they did. They hardly paid me for, so they just gave me this chair, which is cool. So I don't think I can stop working because I
Yeah,
all my furniture is from a job I did.
you got to furnish it.
But I know what you mean. I mean, I do. I think. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think there's a lot of protest to be done inside of our very own industry. I mean, the truth is, it's all just a microcosm of the world, right? So, but I think we have a big I mean, we is like the business. I think business has a big responsibility to make some real systemic changes, and I think they can be done. What do you think?
I think it only happens if you get an Emmy. Like I think if you get an Emmy this year, then it happens. So that's my vote. That
Yeah. What?
that's how it gets done.
All right. Well, here you heard it here first, everybody.
That's how it
What
gets
was it
done.
like? What is it like winning awards? I've never done any
Yeah.
of that.
It's so dumb. It's the craziest thing because it's like you won every award. It's actually wild because I would just be walking in the street in New York and like a group of people and someone be like, "Yo, that's the dude who won the Oscar." And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." Like it genuinely doesn't matter. You could win a Kids' Choice Award
Wait,
and
because
it's
they
got the
think
same weight.
you're. Do they think
No, they
you're
don't
on the
think that.
ballot?
No, they just no, people just think like, oh, you want a Grammy, you want people don't really know what
It
the
doesn't
award
matter.
shows
They're just
are.
like you
Like
won something.
only like yeah, only Hollywood knows. Like Hollywood's like actually it was a golden. Everyone's like, oh, dude, it was an Emmy, it was like a VMA. Like they don't know. Like they just saw like a stage and they were like, that's dope. So it's great. I'm good. I don't. I'm done. I'm fine.
Wait, question, and I mean this more as an interrogation to Hollywood, actually, since that's what we're doing today. Did you make? Did you make? I haven't Googled this. Did you make some sort of history in winning this award?
No, I don't know. In like it's like some sort of like maybe in the comedy. I don't even think so. I don't think so. And it was really funny because like they I got onto the red carpet and there was some people being like, "You're the first," and like there was so I don't even remember what they were saying I was the first of, and I was pretty sure I was like, I don't know if that's true. I know you were pumped to say it, but I don't know because I was like, I feel like Aziz or Mahershala or like I was like, I know there's a couple other dudes that I don't. I was like, I'm not sure this is, but like every like it we want that, right? Because there's this like huge obsession with firsts, right? And I
Yeah,
think like Hollywood is so like, oh my God, you like the first like we did it, and it's just like it's amazing, and you're like, no, but like this isn't. It doesn't work like that, you know.
yeah.
It's almost like if you're in a relationship and they're like,
It's
you got to
not.
listen to me, and then you're like, hey, I listened to you yesterday at dinner, and it's like, yeah, not once. I didn't ask you to listen to me once or for the first
Yeah,
time. Like it's like it's a long. It's like we got to build.
it's not like a space landing. No one wants to be the first anymore. Speaking of Mahershala, how did that come about? I did a play with Mahershala some years ago, um,
Oh
and
my God.
he's a very lovely human.
He's amazing. I mean, like it was such a gift because he basically just reached out being like, hey man, I'm a practicing Muslim in Hollywood and I just love that you made a show that shows people actually trying to adhere to their faith. And it was literally just him being like, dude, this was awesome, all right man, take care. And like it was just like so, and then but then of course I was like, oh dude, like we gotta hang and that kind of thing. And then we did, and at some point he was like, let me know if you need anything. and and I think it was, I don't think he really knew what he was signing up for. I think it kind of started with him being like, yeah, I'll do one or two of them, and then it became this scene arc. um but he was so gracious and so just so giving as a performer and as a person. I think some people would walk onto the set of like a second season show that we have no star power or anything when he walks on, and and he was really like, what do you need me to do? And it was like leading by listening. It was so, I was like, man, I just want to be like you. It really was that kind of energy. And then, like you were saying, I mean, that's so cool for you to remember him, however many years ago, praying in intermissions. And then for me to be like, oh, this dude's coming in, we get to pray between takes. It's just like
That's so
and I
cool.
think for him was super, like, it was a thing because he had told this story to me about how he was on a show and in the weeks after 9/11, he literally he went from series regular to having like one or two lines and just getting like phased out. And then, however many years later, we're talking like almost 20 years later, he's playing a sheikh doing TV. And so it speaks to, I think, a lot of the trajectories we've been talking about. Um, I mean, and I think even truly your role speaks to those trajectories as well, right? Again, it's like you get to be in this. crazy fantastical world where it's not about it's not hinging on your race, it's not hinging on a political issue, it's just like you are the best actor to do it. And so I there's just a couple of these touch points that do feel really encouraging. They feel just like really exciting, and he's definitely one of them. Just the gravity of person he is, but also yeah, to be able to play that role so fully and so openly, it's wild. I send in scripts and I'm like, you're really gonna let us say this? You're not gonna you're not gonna tell me no one's gonna get it? Like it truly, they're just like awesome, and I'm like, I can't believe we get to air this. This is wild.
Who else would you love to have on the show? I heard a Lindsay Lohan rumor, but is there?
She's so sweet. I had a really good conversation with her and about coming on. It seemed to be a done deal, and then it wasn't. But the door is always open. She's always welcome. So she would be great. Um, for me, I really people who I haven't heard of, obviously, right? Like we all as actors love being in that position because we know we're ready. Um, and so much of the show having just this organic feel for me, again, somehow miraculously, this dude Mahershala Ali, who's this two-time Oscar winner, feels like he's just not that on the show, right? Like he just feels like a dude who's supposed to be on the show. Which is an even further testament to his acting ability because it's like he had to act away the Oscars, like you can't see them. You need to be able to just be locked into the thing, and I'm like, man, you're good at this, dude. I'm like, I don't even feel like you've won Oscars. Not that you're bad, it's just you just feel like you're the dude. And so it's really it's wild.
I want you to be my teacher. I want to take the bay. I want to kill my ego.
How do I know I'm not just another one of your desires?
I don't want to have sex with you.
I didn't think you did.
Okay.
I think like speaking of again getting to play roles that you're just purely getting to act, it's so and like getting to really dig into this whole palette because I think even if you look at what you're saying with doing the small indie stuff and then getting to do a Westworld and then getting to do the movies with Taika, like that's this whole other realm of I don't know, I just feel like you're living like every version of like three different childhood dreams.
Yeah, I mean, and Taika's the perfect person actually when you speak of living childhood dreams in the form of like being in a superhero movie. Taika's the perfect person to do that with because he really works from a childlike space, which is not. I mean, he's so wildly intelligent and as an adult human, but also intelligent in the way that kids are intelligent. He's like unafraid to use his imagination. And you said earlier that you liked, that it felt like you were in a good sweet spot when you felt nervous about something. And I think similarly for me, I feel kind of in a sweet spot when I feel terrified, either like from mildly terrified to like abject terror. But I sort of love when I'm doing a job and I'm frankly scared about being able to do it. And I think entering the world of Marvel felt like that for me at first, just in terms of being able to really have that physicality and like, there is this sort of like presence that these actors exude on screen, when they do these sort of like hero stances and they like
Yeah.
turn to camera and there's like, smoke machines and like wind and it's like it's the version I think of acting that feels closest to what it's like to be a pop star or something in some of those moments, and I didn't know everything that I had done previously was so counter to that I was sort of like, geez, can I do this? But something that was so cool about Taika and the way that he approached it and why I wanted to do it so badly with him is he really wanted to buck that convention. So from the moment that you meet Valkyrie, she sort of comes out, she's drunk of course, she comes out and sort of has this kind of hero moment pose and then she falls directly off of her spaceship, because she's just too messy and undone to sort of satisfy any of those tropes
Mm.
about what women in
Which
particular look like in those spaces. So
yeah, because that speaks to your instincts, right? Like you not
yeah,
wanting to play the idea of sexy. Like you don't want to
yeah.
play the idea of hero. Like it's just how do you flip that? How do you make that real?
Yeah, so it's been a real joy, and then obviously I think in this next phase of Marvel, we're really talking about what representation looks like in those spaces because the truth is these movies travel globally in such huge ways, and if you can represent people that are of color, if you can represent people with disabilities, if you can represent the LGBTQIA community inside of these films, it's a pretty big deal, because there's millions and millions of people, particularly young people, that show up to the cinema. And I think if you can show them something that looks like them, they feel valued. And particularly inside of these narratives, that like comic books, that's what it's all about, is that our differences make us special. I mean, even the villains, there's this idea in the comic book world that your villainy comes from real trauma and pain. And I think it's really important for everybody, but for young people especially, to be able to show up to those movies and see projections of themselves. So I'm really excited that we're able to continue to push the bounds of that, and that I'm able to do that with Valkyrie, because there's so many cool, queer characters in the comic books, and they should have a place on screen, of course.